From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya. Tonight we're talking about 2001, A Space Odyssey. It's a 1968 film directed by the one and only Stanley Kubrick. So consider this your spoiler warning.
Yeah, turn back now if you haven't seen this movie yet, and then tune back in. I have a feeling though, if you are a big fan of science fiction, you may have seen it. I hadn't.
Yes, that really surprised me. Really surprised me that you had not seen this film.
Got stuck in and I watched it.
Good. About time.
It's going to be a lot of spoilers.
Heaps of spoilers in this one. So what was your number one takeaway, Surrey, from 2001, A Space Odyssey?
The number one takeaway is that space travel and docking maneuvers can be quite majestic and beautiful. Yeah. As this movie took particular delight in demonstrating a docking maneuver. Well, several, but in particular, the very first opening one with the shuttle, a very stylish looking shuttle, I have to say. It would fit right into modern contemporary science fiction. It was docking with a great big sort of hub and spoked wheel space station, which is a waypoint between Earth and the moon.
But was it only majestic because of the score? You know, because of the soundtrack beneath it.
Well, and the slow, considered pace at which it was filmed, and the angles and the shots. There was no. The point of that scene was the docking maneuver and the beauty of it. Yeah. As opposed to, say, nowadays, we're so familiar with spaceships docking that it's almost.
It's bypassed.
It's just it's like having you do it to show he's got to a space station, an establishing shot. Yeah. Like you might have someone pull up in a car and get out. Okay, he's at this place now. Yeah. And you're here in a modern film where it's so commonplace in our I suppose mental vocabulary, our film vocabulary. Yeah, you just have the spaceship come in a little bit moment where it docks, just to establish here they are. They're getting.
We're at the space shuttle.
Patty pops, yeah. But no, this was it was nice to watch.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Nice to watch. So that's that one. Also, I think I've mentioned it before, but yeah, quite naturally, of course, computers will kill us all.
Yes, of course. Yeah, well, because we have the great HAL 9000, the computer that never makes a mistake, has not ever made a mistake since 1992.
Not in the history of all HALs. That immediately would have been a red flag for me.
Yeah. And I mean, these really bright astronauts pretty much, they start to reason that a little bit, don't they? You know, they start to go, well, hang on a second. Maybe you could make a mistake, but then they don't want to admit it to him because, of course, he's controlling the ship, isn't he?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a silly human error, isn't it? Put all the faith in the computer to run the ship.
Well, you've got to understand that back in 1968 when they're making this, we're at the very beginning of computers. Computers were only just starting to turn up in business. Yeah. They had been in universities and defense departments. They just started to turn up in business. So there's still kind of this idea that, you would just basically, why wouldn't you have the computer run everything? Yeah, yeah. And now we're a bit older and wiser and see what comes of computer programming and artificial intelligence, and we realize that we're just, the biggest failure that computers have is the fact they're created by humans. Once we've got artificial intelligences and computers being created by other artificial intelligence and computers, we're going to start seeing an iterative improvement in quality.
But this computer was so advanced that it was emotional, and it even says that to them. It's, when they do question what it thinks about the mistake, it says it's always human error.
Yes.
And it's such a great, it's always human error.
Every time.
And the fact that, because they've tested the same issue, didn't they, back on Earth, and it came back with a different response. And why would there be a different response? Human error.
Humans.
Yeah.
Get rid of them.
Look, you could argue the whole plot of the film is all because humans make mistakes, you know?
I've always argued that if we didn't have people using our computers, they would be flawless.
Yep.
That's me as an IT professional. If I didn't have people using the systems I made, there would never be any problems.
And I had a mate in OH&S who, when he learnt OH&S, the guy said, we can design a room to be 100% safe. As soon as you put a human in the room, the safety level drops right down to about 5%.
They become the least safe thing there.
Yeah, because you can't determine what a human will do. Like a human might put their finger into a PowerPoint. Like you just cannot determine what a human would do. You can make the PowerPoint very safe.
Will put their finger in the PowerPoint.
Right. Or another body part. Who knows?
So with that in mind then, Mark, is this a hope, a warning, or an experiment?
It's such a good space brain question, isn't it? And I see that you got mugs available now.
You saw the mug come along.
It's fantastic. Great.
I haven't hooked up the payment gateway yet. I realise I'm...
By the time this episode comes out to our 10 audience members...
Both of them who have a job will be able to...
That's right. If any of those members can afford the mug, go for it. I think it's an experiment. Yeah, I really do believe this is an experiment film, but I would love to know if I'm right or wrong. And I guess, and we're going to talk about it at length, I've been really gung-ho about talking about this film. It's an examination of modern life in 1968, a prediction of where we're heading as humanity and where we're going. And, you know, you and I have just briefly spoken about that, like with AI and computer algorithms and, you know, all of that sort of human error thing is part of it. The idea of the film also, I think, brings in aliens of some other wondrous sort of experiment where I think humans are the experiment in a way to these aliens.
There's a little bit, the Beyond clearly
I agree,
borrowed a bit from that.
Yeah. I saw some strong connections. I mean, this film is much more mysterious than the Beyond. You know, they sort of spell it out a bit more in the Beyond, but this film, you know, just with that rectangle, that black rectangle situation.
I love that.
Just this dark black orb is the alien, or is the technology of the alien, or
the fact is that
we don't know.
Anything to do with one of these aliens will be mysterious. So why try to come up with detail?
Yeah,
it's just this featureless, almost non-reflective, matte black, and rectangle box, and it may as well be that. It may as well just be something featureless as being something fantastically detailed. Like you look at the alien from Alien. Yeah. Like it was fantastically detailed. It had little, you know, lines and ridges and bumps and all bits and pieces that didn't make it any more explicable to us.
No.
It was still just as mysterious as being just, it may as well have been a black box. In fact, in computer programming language, we do talk about black box programming where we just assume that we don't worry about what's inside one part of the program. We only look at what it provides out. So we talk about this black box programming where we only look at what's on the interface, the very edge of it. Yep. There's the stuff that we get, whatever happens inside of it, we assume that it works or that it's doing whatever it's meant to be doing. It's not our concern. That's black box programming. And now I've just said that, and this, you know, the how computer, I'm wondering if ArthurCClarke didn't, in fact, use a big black box in his story as a metaphor for that. As a metaphor for programming, where it's just black box programming, you know. Yeah,
and I mean, I even thought seeing this, and I know you described it so well, talking about that blackness of the alien in Alien, how they just made it, you know, it was a sort of like a never-ending sleek black, you know, the head of the alien, you know, like, and the nostrils being at the back, or if they are nostrils, whatever, and just that blackness. And again, I think in this film, it's you know, obviously before Alien, but it's that idea again, like this mysterious foreign alien, unknown, you know, power. It's obviously got the ability to move around, you know, like it appears on Earth, it appears on the moon, it's buried, and then it's floating around Jupiter. Like, I mean, this thing has got power, but it doesn't have to be an alien like Alien. It's just this black box. And it also, in terms of story and filmmaking, you can understand you don't give all the details away. It's that old sort of example of horror films where don't give everything away, like reveal the least, because a human's imagination can come up with something far scarier than you can ever see. You know, the kind of lamer horror films, you see the monster in the first 3 or 4 seconds of the film, don't you? And you're kind of like, oh, disappointed. Whereas when you don't see the monster for as long as possible, your brain is filling in the holes, isn't it? You know, so the most terrifying thing is what's in the corner when you can't see it. Once you see it, it's not so terrifying, you know? So I think in a way this film probably borrows from that a little bit, but I think definitely an experiment, because the film takes us on that journey, the dawn of man, you know, to a more advanced human colony that's in space and on moon, and sort of conquering space a little bit, and then also what happens next, you know, after we have this brush with aliens, you know, which is sort of the ending of the film, I believe. So yeah, I think it's an experiment. I think it's just revealing to us what humans are like, you know, and we'll go into a bit more of that later in the episode, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think also clearly an experiment. The whole structure of the film, I could almost argue that there's not really a story in this film.
Yeah.
Like there's story elements, but in so many other films, you could look, Star Wars, similarly, you know, about 10 years after this, it was made, clearly a story. In fact, it's the classic hero's journey plot.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Alien, likewise, has got that start where they're all literally in stasis, and it ends, she's going back into stasis. Yeah. You know, it has, and in the middle, there's some exciting parts. Yeah. We're in this kind of, there's exciting bits, tense bits, revelation bits, but almost not really a story arc in a classical sense. So there is obviously, don't jump down my throat. Well, no, hey, get on Twitter and jump down my throat if you want, but
that's right. Tell us.
It won't help you.
Tell Surrey he's wrong.
You can try, but it won't help. My rightness or wrongness doesn't change based on whether you think I'm right or wrong. Yeah, that's deep, isn't it?
It is.
But anyway, yeah. So I definitely think it's an experiment, an exploration of, as you say, different aspects of human existence, different aspects of life, different aspects of technology.
Yeah.
And in the evolution of humans, there's also the evolution of tech. You know,
that's right.
The apes get the bone, and then they have the spaceships, and then at the end there's some sort of wormhole-y type travel or something. It's not really told what happens, but he's either given a vision or taken away to some place to be exposed to some lesson or something. But there's that evolution there of man and technology and
I guess I kind of think the plot is it's the plot of humanity in this version. You know, it's a science fiction version of humanity from the dawn of man till the dawn of some sort of crossbreed human man, which is at the end of the film. That's how I sort of see it.
Others referred to at various times.
Yeah, so I feel like it, I suppose because we don't have them, you know, at the start we've got 15, 20 minutes of, you know, the monkeys, the kind of human, and then the fact is the film sort of declares that once that they touch that alien object, then all of a sudden they have a bit of an epiphany of violence, you know, that they can use a weapon.
The tool use, yeah.
And then they're eating meat, and then they kill another man, you know, like another monkey man. And that's all it took, you know, like humans took a massive leap after that, you know. And then likewise, like they touch it again on the moon, and they're sort of going to Jupiter. So there's like another leap, but there's no, you know, the monkeys are obviously millions of years ago, and then the people on the spaceships are different astronauts, and then, you know, at the end it's some other creature as well. So it's sort of more, the plot is man, you know, as in humanity, you know.
So the Sphinx's riddle.
Yeah. So it's a big story in that way. So what about anything yourself in the world of Surrey in terms of being creative at all? Anything to catch up the audience on?
No, look, yeah, as I said, I'm working on the shop. So the shop's sort of a Gravity Undone, and it covers off some my creativity stuff, exit plan stuff, and Space Brains stuff. It's just a way for people to show their appreciation.
Yep.
Help us buy beers. Help us
Fund
pay
our $1 million studio.
Well, yeah, I've got to upgrade my $2 lapel mic.
That's right.
Try and get some, and sort of some of that dampening foam so we can pull out some of the reverb in this place.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, no, I haven't been doing a lot. I'm organising some interviews at the moment to interview some creative people.
Yep.
To get their take on everything for my creativity podcast, which
nice.
I've gotten a very enthusiastic response from that, from direct emails or someone's just, I haven't read through the email yet, but it's sort of a bit of a life story, a creative life story, if you will, wanting to see if they can get involved. And I thought, oh, okay, let's explore that. That sounds like fun. So that's pretty good. I have been watching, I've been playing through my Netflix. At the moment, I caught up with Hungerford, which is the first one in The Darkest Dawn by Drew Casson. And that was very worth watching. In fact, it's almost worth watching The Darkest Dawn first and then seeing this as like a prequel rather than seeing this, trying to watch it in the correct order. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because The Darkest Dawn is clearly, it's this beautiful, talking about evolution. It's an evolutionary step up. So the Hungerford was his first film. It was done on what is referred to as a micro budget. Yeah. Which is to say, I don't think he had a producer or a production unit. I think it was him and what he could scrape together. Yep. And obviously it's his first time. He's edited a full feature film together, all the rest of it. And it's quite a good film. But you can see then, having watched The Darkest Dawn and then watching this one, I could see those parts that he's carried on. He's gone, yep, that worked well. And then he's touched them up. Like he's notched up the dialogue a little bit and the camera placement and all the scenes. So it's like a really sort of educational view into the growth and evolution of his skill. I really would like to see a third movie. Yeah. Because if he's still going to go like that way from what he learned in Hungerford, he used and improved on in Darkest Dawn. If he has a movie 3 where he's picking up on and improving what he's done there, then that'd be awesome. That's excellent. I did want to say a shout out to Drew because he reached out on Instagram and Twitter. He's reached out to us and kind of thanked us for doing the episode and stuff. So, and I would like to sort of get even maybe a bit more response from him and maybe some other crew members. But yeah, it was really good for him to shout out. We've had a couple of shout outs now. It's the third director. So it's excellent to get that kind of feedback, isn't it? You know, a little bit of... Well, I really hope to get a bit of an interview going with some directors, writers of screenplays. We could add that into the space, brains, definitely. We love the whole art and craft of creating these movies, and would love to get different people's views on it who have had to deal with the real technical issues of directing and dealing with things. And I mean, you and I can joke and talk about what we feel about it, but it'd be great, if you have the director or the writer kind of clarifying or telling us what they thought or what their intention was, that'd be fantastic. There's always extenuating circumstances, like, because you go, oh, why didn't they just do this? And invariably, like, if we've thought of it, they've probably thought of it too. But then why didn't they do it? Well, that's a very good question. That's actually what we want to know, because there will be, there'll be budget, there'll be time, there'll be equipment, there'll be competing ideas, who knows? Yeah, any number of things. And anyway, so that's me and yourself. If you've gone any further, with these short scripts, or you're currently developing a doco. Yeah, I'm doing that. So it's not really science fiction related, but I'm doing that back on the tools of the camera and stuff, and editing that today, which was great. And but I went to this writers' little conference on Friday night, and in fact, the producer behind Other Life was the feature film guy on the panel there. Okay. So I had a little chat to him afterwards, actually, about Other Life quickly, and also about script writing. And he was saying that, he's always open to scripts, and his big advice, of course, is read scripts. Like he reads 10 a week, because this is what is being sent to him and being suggested to him and all this sort of stuff. And he's just like, people send scripts that they're not ready yet. They're basically, like a first or second draft, and really they need to be about the 18th version of the script. That's his opinion on it, but he's also really open to scripts. And he spoke a bit about Other Life and what it took to get that up, and a bit about Ben Lucas again,
you know, being such a great little creative director of Other Life and his other film Wasted on the Young. So yeah, it was good to have a little chat to him, but it was also great, this little panel, because it got me thinking, because they had a web series producer, they had the feature film producer, they had a short film producer, and they had a doco producer, and people were pitching some ideas, and then they were giving their intake on whether the idea would work in those formats or how you could make the idea work in those formats. So it was a really it was a great insight into, because some of them they were like, that's not a feature film, but it's a documentary, you know, and they're like, you know, if you did this, that would make it a feature film. You know, if we kind of pushed the character this way, yeah, maybe it'd make it a feature film. And even the short film guy was like, oh, that little bit you said at the start, that's a short film. That's a great little thematic, you know, and it was such a good night out just to hear those different responses from people in the industry in Perth, you know.
That sounds great.
And it was great as well, because it's like, wow, these people are in Perth making this stuff, you know.
Yeah,
like,
I would have loved to go there.
So yeah,
I was camping.
Yeah, there you go. That's still just as valuable. But yeah, so because I've got an idea, as I said, for a couple of shorts, and I'm going to get one going in about a month. Like I'll get it plotting. And I've had a bit of an idea for a science fiction. I feel like it could be a really good web series. You could make a series of them. So yeah, just plotting through that really. Yeah. But it was quite inspirational, just picking up some of those tidbits from those people on Friday night. Yeah, it was great. I liked it. Yeah.
If only Stanley Kubrick could have been there.
Yeah, I know. He'd be one in a million. So we probably should. So this is episode 10, sorry. We're up to number 10. It's a lucky number 10, 2001 like Space Odyssey.
20 weeks.
Yeah, that's right, I think. We've squeezed it in there. So 2001, we should just go through some of those credits. I know you mentioned before, co-written by ArthurCClarke. A little bit of a tidbit. I don't know if you Googled him. I Googled him. He's pretty much just written this and a couple other TV series and the sequel to this film. But he is responsible for satellites being used for weather forecasting.
ArthurCClarke.
Yeah. I mean, this is interesting, isn't it? Like because he was a radio, he was in the British Army, you know, in the radio telecommunications area. And when I Googled him, they said that he basically was the guy that suggested that they should use weather satellites to predict the weather. So he was sort of beyond that. But yeah, I mean, he's written some different things, a couple of TV series, but he hasn't written heaps of different stuff. I was expecting him a bit more. And obviously him and Stanley Kubrick wrote
I think he's written like a lot of articles and things.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Short stuff. He has written... I think in the 80s there was a TV series, like science fiction TV series he was behind, and he did write there's a sequel to this, 2010. Kubrick had nothing to do with it, but and that was made in the 80s. But he was also a bit of a recluse when I Googled him. He went off to Sri Lanka and lived in Sri Lanka and stuff.
He's well known for the quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is it's good quote because it has so many different sort of layers of meaning to it, which I really quite like.
Yeah.
It's
well, magic is important for storytelling, I think, isn't it? Don't you reckon?
Yeah.
I think it's an ingredient in there.
Yeah, there's not a single... I mean, the whole idea of science fiction requires there to be a magic leap. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just science.
That's right.
You can have a science movie.
Yeah.
Which is kind of almost and you get these sort of documentary movies where there is no fiction to the science. It actually is just a science documentary, basically. So as soon as it becomes a science fiction, you've got to have a touch of magic. You've got to have that, okay, here's where science gets to. Let's just say there's some sort of a leap here. What could happen? Yeah.
So, and I mean, the good, I think, you know, when you just talk about science in science fiction, the good science fiction films, they always push that to some element. And even if it is like this film, it's 30 years later, you go, well, that never happened, you know, or, you know, and even I said to my wife after this, like, you know, like you can imagine and them saying the moon landing and just going, oh, there'll be a colony on the moon. Like that's the logical next step, isn't it? And yet we haven't done that, have we? You know, so...
There's not really much reason to do it, I guess.
I suppose that's the thing. But you can imagine at the time in the 60s, them saying, yeah, well, we're going to the moon. We're going to conquer the moon. We're going to mine it. We're going to build a little colony there. Why wouldn't we?
Well, as the whole space race was cracking along full ball there. There was rockets going up orbiting the Earth.
Yeah.
The planned moon landing was 69. which Stanley Kubrick, of course, filmed as a hoax, as we all know.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all.
You don't think he filmed it?
No, because he hasn't been credited for it on IMDb.
George
That's
Lucas?
the difference. Well, yeah, it would be more George Lucas's kind of work,
It would have
I
been
reckon.
one of them.
I think Kubrick, I said this to you before, I reckon Kubrick would have said he'll do it and then made a whole nother film about making the hoax, just to kind of put out there in the art world, just to conquer it. But Kubrick himself, unfortunately he's passed away now many years, but he is one of these filmmakers, and if people out there listening, they are into their film, they will understand that this guy is not just a standard filmmaker. This guy is what we do call an auteur. If you go through all of his films, this is his only science fiction, right?
Some people sort of say Clockwork Orange might be a bit science fiction.
No, I disagree. But they can say that. They can argue with me on Twitter. Yeah. But it's just that if you go through all of his films, I reckon for me, he's actually one of these guys that it's almost like he conquered every genre in his own style. It's really bizarre. Like
he had a bit of a taste of everything. Didn't he?
All of his, he did comedy, he
standard.
did science fiction, he did the full-blown sort of action, he did a war movie, he did the drama, he did a horror thriller with The Shining. But each one still stamped his approval, and for me, one of the things that stands out in his films is colour, and we'll talk a bit about that with film language, but you don't really see many filmmakers that choose such a bold level of colour that Stanley Kubrick does. And of course you can go, it was the 60s, it was flamboyance, it was flares, it was things like this, but no, even if you go back and watch a whole bunch of 60 movies, you don't see what you see in this film.
Look at, say, for example, the James Bond films at the time.
Yeah.
It was all the browns.
Yeah.
And they were trying to show stylish.
Yeah, that's right.
Fashionable people, but they're wearing sort of the browns and the greys and the muted reds and things, yeah.
So anyway, this guy is a bit of a dream to talk about, I think, from a film point of view, and I think from a science film. This film does a bit of both. Yeah, and it stars some actors. These guys, look, it was filmed in Britain. I think a couple of these actors are British actors. Looking them up on IMDb myself. They're not, and he quite often in Kubrick films, you'll notice this, Jack Nicholson is in The Shining, but a lot of his films, the actors are just real good working actors. All the guys in this, I think Kerr Dudley, Gary Lockwood and William Sylvester, sort of the three key characters in the film, throughout the film. You got the two astronauts and the doctor. All those three, when I looked them up, because I don't know them, I'll be totally honest, I don't recognise them, but they starred in TV series as a main character, some show that went for 6 or 7 years. One of them was The $1 Million Man, which was a show that ran for about 8 years in the US.
The $1 Million Man?
The $6 Million Man, sorry, yeah.
Really?
And
which one was that? I thought that was not Lee Majors, I think it was $6 Million Man.
Anyway, look him up. There was one of them was part of it. Maybe Gary Lockwood, if I'm right. I might be wrong. But yeah, these are good working actors, but not like, superstars. Did I get that wrong? Tell me I'm wrong. And of course, 2001 was filmed in...
Oh, well, Gary Lockwood was in Star Trek pilot episode.
Oh, there you go.
How about that?
Yeah. There's another connection to science fiction. And all these guys pretty much worked throughout the 80s and the 90s and kept working, well after this particular movie. And as I said, there was a sequel, 2010, but Kubrick had nothing to do with that.
No, that was ArthurCClarke.
Yeah.
There's also actually a great book I read of Clarke's is The Rendezvous with Rama. It's been optioned for movies many times.
Yeah, right.
Even Morgan Freeman has expressed his desire to produce a movie based on that.
Oh, right.
And having read the book, you can see the similarities with 2001 Space Odyssey. There's a lot of it's not a character driven story. It is very much a science driven story. Yeah, the characters are all just sort of competent, hard-working scientists.
Yeah.
There's not really a love story. There's a bit of sort of family stuff going there, but not really any love stories or any of these sort of person-to-person conflicts. It's all exploring the science of this alien spacecraft, basically.
Yeah, right.
Which you can sort of see similarly in 2001. There's not, we don't have a dramatic love interest. We don't have. There's a bit of that doctor at the start talks to his daughter. He can't make the birthday party, but there's not really much made of that, except you got to think, oh well, whatever he's doing must be pretty serious if he's going to travel on the day he knows it's his little daughter's birthday, and he's clearly quite fond of his little daughter. So I guess it sort of introduces how serious it is, but there's no... It's not character driven in that sense.
No. And the film doesn't dwell on any one character for too long, does it?
And I have a feeling that's the reason Rendezvous with Rama, though it has been optioned since it was written. So it was written in 1973. So it's 45 years.
Wow, that's a long time of being optioned. It's
been optioned constantly that whole time.
Probably needs Tarantino to take it up or something, doesn't it?
But I have a problem. I think the problem is that it doesn't have like these human dramatic parts, but it also doesn't have big space fights or anything. It's the book, and what's really good about it is its exploration of these scientific topics.
Yeah. And
2001, same deal. Like it's this exploration of scientific topics, and it took someone like Kubrick to go, well, I'm bold enough to just make a film that's just an exploration. It's part art film, part thriller, you might say there with Hal, and and part just science exploration. So I think it's going to be quite challenging to make that one as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But so
look, we'll put it out there. Someone might make it.
maybe you will, Mark.
Maybe we will. Maybe we can take them up.
Okay, so we've talked about the plot, and I'm going to go through it because I think the plot can be done quite quickly. There's large portions of this where it's scenic, visual examination. So the movie starts with two tribes of ape people. They sit about grubbing for grubs and plant material.
Yep.
Then they
fight and fight.
They fight over a water hole.
Yeah.
And the fight over the water hole is just a screaming match.
Yeah.
And they each just do displays of how determined they are. And so one of them gets it. But
there's also a fight and flight world because a leopard kills one of them.
Is that not the greatest? Anyway, we'll go
because then they're terrified. Like at night time they're not really sleeping.
Oh,
you know what I mean? So it's a real.
No wonder they're so grumpy.
Yeah, I know.
They're not getting good sleep. But then one day they wake up and there's just this black monolith sitting there. It's just a black rectangle, and they sort of carry on a bit like pork chops for a bit, as you'd expect.
Yeah.
As you wake up and there's a monolith in your bedroom, you go, what the hell?
You would. I think you would.
But they touch it. And the next sort of scene, there's the one that sort of touched it is sitting there looking at these bones, and you can see he's thinking.
He has an aha.
Up until then, we haven't seen these guys really thinking. They've just been getting a bit of food and carrying on. Mm-hmm. And then he takes up a bone and he uses it to initially hunt animals.
Yep.
And then the next time they're fighting over the water hole, he kills one of the other ape men.
They kill one of the ape, yeah.
And he stands up and he goes, yes, I am the victor. And he chucks his bone up in the air. And then we have this beautiful cut. I can't remember what sort of cut it is, it's called. But as the bone's falling down, it cuts to being a spaceship orbiting the Earth.
It's classic.
From there, we find that, this doctor is... Basically, the doctor goes up and gives a speech about... He says nothing.
Yeah.
Which is what struck me. It was like the content of his speech is like, so you've said nothing. You sympathised, and then said any questions, and then you said I can't answer any.
But I liked that because it was kind of like a very. I mean, you and I have been in business meetings like that, where it's just like you're sitting there and it's pretty much nothing. And I liked that, although it's like epic. We're on the moon because he's come to a moon colony. He's basically saying, "Oh, thanks for putting up with this cover story that there's an epidemic on the moon colony and no one's allowed to land here, and everyone's because one of them's like, how long do we have to keep up the cover for? Oh, don't worry, your family. We're reassuring your family that it's okay.
For as long as we need to.
Yeah. But we as you know, it's sensitive, this situation. We don't really know. Once we know more, we'll do more.
Yeah. So we do eventually find out, and they've uncovered a monolith, the
another
same as the ape men on the moon. It's been buried for 4 million years.
Yep.
The impression I got was it was buried at the time. The one that appeared on the apes.
Yeah, that's what I did too. Yeah.
This one appeared on the moon.
Yeah.
And then it gives off a big screeching noise, and then we cut 18 months later.
Yep.
Spaceship is heading off towards Jupiter, and on this spaceship we learn about these there's 5 astronauts, 2 of them awake, 3 of them in hibernation.
Hypersleep again.
Well, it wasn't hypersleep. They made it as hibernation, so their heart was still beating. They're still breathing. They're just very slow.
That slowed them right down.
Yeah, so...
that was good. I liked that.
And we met HAL 9000, this supercomputer AI that controls the whole thing. There's a failure on the spaceship. The astronauts have to investigate it, but they can't find any problem with it. HAL assures them, oh no, absolutely there's a problem. I can't ever be wrong.
Yeah.
The Earth-based people say, well, our HAL 9000 says there is no problem and it can never be wrong.
And they do test it, and the astronauts are saying they can't find it.
Yeah, like, there's no problem. HAL says, no, absolutely there is. The other HAL says, no, there's not. Yeah. So the astronauts say, hide away and sort of go, I think we might want to turn this HAL off until we figure out what's going on. HAL doesn't like that and kills them. except for Dave.
Yeah.
As we all know, the very famous line of "Open the pod bay doors, HAL." Right. I'm sorry, Dave, I cannot do that. And
so good.
I was waiting the whole movie for that one line.
Yeah.
But
and I liked. We'll talk more about Singe later, but I love how HAL says. He goes, well, I'll go through the manual hatch, and he says, I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah. It's like, he's stuck in this pod. Like, he's going to have to try something. And then he does it, and he gets through. And then what is so cool about Hal is then Hal starts freaking out because he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And he won't answer him, and it's like he's running, he runs through the ship to turn him off. And it's just like, Hal's going, stop doing that. It's such a good scene. It's nail-biting stuff.
So he does turn off Hal, and then we discover that the monolith on the moon sent out a signal to Jupiter. So go investigate what's happening. And he does. And he goes out, and there is a monolith floating around Jupiter.
There is, yeah.
And that's when things get a little bit disco.
They do. We get some really good 1960s film effects here.
Yeah, which is, some of them were actually really good. Like, some of them look like computer animations that would be effective today. Mm-hmm. Some of them look just like color filters type of thing over landscapes. But, such as 1968 technology.
That's right, yeah. I was impressed because some of it was like, it reminded me of an ultrasound. And I think maybe there was a bit of that used in it, I reckon.
Yeah,
and
I was reading about the different shapes and things they use in Rorschach's tests, and they're using various charts and tables.
And and there was some landscapes where he's like saturated, so it's probably like an ice mount, like a snowy mountain, and of course he saturated the snow to be pink. So you're sort of like, you're a bit,
pink and blue.
Yeah. And then maybe lakes or something, and the lakes are green, so they kind of just look really abstract to us.
Yeah, it looks
very alien.
I got that feeling that it was sort of depicting that this fellow was traveling through
some sort of
an altered set of dimensions, because you've got the Doppler effect. So when you travel faster, you start catching up to things ahead of you faster. So you get a red shift of color.
Yeah, and
sounds go up in pitch. And so if he was traveling through like a wormhole type thing...
I think it was quite a good effect, that scene. There was a terrifying sound underneath it, it was like a choir, and then also like a whooshing sound, and it was kind of I was a bit creeped out during that moment.
Yeah, there were a couple of effective noises in this that I'll talk about a little bit there.
Yeah. But anyway, so he goes through the wormhole. What happens? All of a sudden?
Well, he finds himself in it looks like a Baroque French apartment.
Nice.
But the floor is these, glowing white tiles, which is sort of...
very sci-fi.
Like in the moon base ceiling, basically, but on the floor. And he walks through, and it's just this...
There's nothing odd in there.
What would you call it? 18th century, 17th century French palace type of thing?
That sounds pretty...
And he turns around, and... You're hearing his breathing the whole time because he's in his suit, and he turns around and he sees now there's someone sitting out in the other room eating dinner, and he goes quiet, and then someone turns around and it's him, an old man.
An older version.
Yeah, and so then we're taking it from his perspective, where this guy sort of looking around, frowning at where the spacesuit, but there's no spacesuited person there. No. And so he eats a bit of food, he knocks his glass on the floor, which breaks. And when he goes down to look, he looks over at his bed, and there he is, an even older man who's clearly at the end of his life.
Yeah.
And then the camera moves to be from his perspective, where he's like, reaching out one last little bit, and at the foot of the bed is this obelisk.
Yeah.
Monolith. I keep calling it obelisk. Monolith sitting there.
Monolith set.
And we zoom in close to it, and then we get the dun 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 music.
Yes.
And then we go into this space, because always when you get that when the ape touched it, the sun was peeking over, and there's like an alignment of planets. And here we get the same sort of thing. We get it looks like maybe it's Earth or the Moon or Jupiter or something. I can't remember. Who knows? It wasn't Jupiter. It was either the Earth or it was one of the moons of Jupiter lining up with the sun.
It's like all lining up. There's 3 or 4 planets.
And then
like
a halo sort of comes in from one end and appears, and it's like this fetus in a bubble. That's and at this time, if you haven't seen this movie and you're listening to us talk about it, you'll be sitting there going, "What the?"
I know, and that is the response. Really, you're like going,
but
"What?"
Even watch the film, you're kind of going, "Okay,
what is going on here?"
I don't think we can take this literally. I don't think there's literally a fetus in a bubble floating
above
through space that is the size of a planet.
Yeah, no.
So clearly, we're getting a bit of metaphor here, a bit of size miscomparison and so forth. But yeah, and it basically ends there with this fetus looking, its eyes wide open, just like looking at the Earth.
Yeah, looking at Earth.
Apparently in the book, and maybe even some director's cut, I don't know, there's something about nuclear weapons exploding. But I actually, after having watched it, I've read that little bit and watched back through the end bit. Definitely, in the version I watched was the theatrical release. It was just this, basically the hemisphere of the Earth on one side, and then the fetus bubble on the other side.
That's right.
Looking at each other.
That's the only version I've ever seen as well. I haven't, and I don't think there is a director's version.
It might just be the book.
Yeah, maybe it's in the book.
Because the idea is that he comes and like destroys those weapons. Yeah. Because there's now the next step.
Yeah.
Much like the ape man gained this new tech.
Yeah.
And so the Star Child is that new tech. So yeah, as you can see, there's not a huge obvious story to all of this.
No.
But it goes for nearly 2.5 hours if you watch the whole thing. If you don't watch the credits, I think you can get down to about 2 hours 20.
If you fast forward that to 4 minutes and 30 seconds of just music at the start as well, blackness.
Yes,
is part of the viewing experience. I think this day. I was going to say
the whole viewing experience, that would have been so intense seeing this in the cinemas.
Yeah,
because if you'd gone in knowing that there's going to be some maybe a bit of science fiction going on there, and it just goes dark and it stays dark and there's a bit of music playing, like I said, because it opens with that very famous 2001 hit. Is that like the Thus Spake Zarath? I can't remember the piece of music it is.
No, I don't know off the top.
Everyone knows the 2001 Space Odyssey music.
Right.
Because then it just suddenly cracks into that, and the sun comes up over a planet. The moon and the Earth and the sun are all in alignment. That would have been.
Yeah.
And then watching that whole 10 minutes unfolding of the apes.
Yeah. You would have been questioning what the hell is going on.
What am I into? I thought this was a space movie.
Yeah. Why are there apes?
Yeah. But then beautifully enough, of course, I think when you're sort of questioning that, you start getting into the story of it.
You do.
There's 2 sort of tribes that meet at the waterhole and have a bit of fight, and then that one guy got eaten by attacked by the leopard, and they're hiding in the caves, and you're starting to get into this story, which has got no dialogue because they're ape men, of course. But then you get this obelisk there, which is just that little slap in the face that says, "Oh yeah, by the way, science fiction."
That's right.
In case
here's the weird bit.
In case you're wondering.
In case you were just questioning if you're going to walk out of the theatre right now.
Yeah. So
here's your alien.
And that reminds me, the other part of that viewing experience, being in the original cinemas, watching this, that opening, once we get out of that apes, we go to the space stations and the docking procedure.
Yeah.
And that's just the Danube waltz, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful and such excellent resolution. It's just it's such high quality space special effects.
Yeah.
You would just be, I think you'd be mesmerising seeing the cinema, seeing that for the first time back in '68, when previously that sort of quality of space vision could only be dreamed of.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, like, I think that sort of juxtaposition of the music and the high quality of the space models, etc., they used with some movie magic of the time. Again, I kept thinking, like, when I watched it this time, I kept thinking, oh, this would be so digital now. And there's glimpses that you can tell, oh, that's a model, green screen, but it's done really, really well.
Oh, well,
and the models are so...
They didn't have green screen 68.
No?
I was looking at the technology that they developed for this movie was last used in a blockbuster in 1993.
Yeah, right.
Cliffhanger. With Sylvester Stallone.
Right. So they just build the scape.
We didn't have the technology in computers and digital manipulation until the 90s.
Yeah.
To be able to do green screen effectively.
Yeah, okay.
So this was a front projection with...
Right.
It's a very groovy bit of, like a really good bit of analog green screening, basically.
Yes, yeah,
where they're using two-way mirrors and
so you're sort of projecting them into the scene and choosing that scene.
The projector's like right angles and bounces off a mirror. The camera looks through the mirror at the scene and the actor there. And then they use lighting to alter the contrasts to make sure that the actor and the scene merge together. And you'll notice in those things, they don't tend to show the feet.
No.
Because it's hard to get the floor looking a part of the scene.
Yeah, right.
But so I was amazed because, like you, I was watching it going, and I thought, green screen bit here and there, whatever. But when I quickly had to look after that to go, how'd they get that docking procedure is so beautiful. And the camera swoops through the space station rings and this thing sort of lines itself up and you're looking at it going, they didn't have computer. I mean, I can do that quite easily on my computer now, but the computer I've got now would be the equivalent of a supercomputer in the 60s.
Yeah, of course.
Like in fact, beyond what they would consider to be a supercomputer.
Yeah.
So how they do it, and it's all practical, analog.
Yeah.
Literally movie magic, whereas nowadays it's digital magic.
Yeah.
Back then they had to use mirrors and glass plates and special lighting effects and choose the camera angles just right. And
that story across.
I think he did that scene so beautifully. In fact, I'm accidentally sliding into best scene there.
That's all right. Yeah, well, I mean, for me, again, it's a bit like Alien. I watched this one with my wife, and it's interesting when you go back in time to any older movie like this. I mean, it is getting a bit old. The pace is a lot slower.
Yeah,
the pace of editing.
I had to remind myself that this movie was pre-Star Wars, obviously.
Yeah.
Because Star Wars then took some of that technology, added a little bit more of its own.
That's right.
To make this incredible fast-paced dogfights and
That's right.
laser shooting, using that visual quality that Kubrick had sort of pioneered. So this is before all of that. This is back when space movies were just kind of, pretty shonky.
Yeah.
Really. They were like, some shonky set.
Yeah.
Oh, we are in a spaceship and outside with the nighttime sky or something.
Yeah.
And then this movie just sort of comes along and I was watching that opening space sequence and you would be hard pressed to do better with digital stuff today.
You would.
You'd be able to, with the digital stuff, you'd be able to take a little bit more. There wasn't a lot of model look to it because of the way the camera moved through there.
That's right, yeah.
But even so, you'd be hard pressed to do better. I've seen modern contemporary science fiction which doesn't produce as effective a look.
This is the real example that sometimes that physical model can just look better than digital. And you see that, and I think the digital it obviously needs a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of effect to it to make it look good. I think now in 2019, you're starting to see special effects digitally that you're like, wow, blown away with, and even on a lower budget, but when it's done this well, like it is in 2001, it just stands the test of time. Like you're watching it now in 2019 going far out. How the hell did they do that?
The only difference now, as you said, is the sort of the pacing like that.
Yeah. Well, the overall film, the pacing is slow.
That docking maneuver procedure is like 5 or 8 minutes long or something.
You wouldn't get anything that long now.
There's no dialogue. It's just music. And it's beautiful to watch. And in watching a movie like this, you have to put yourself in the mindset of 68. You can't be looking at post-Matrix.
No.
You know, the Matrix is one of these watershed moments where action movies got slick.
Yeah.
Like, and got, you know, super fast cuts with...
That's right.
There's amazing digital effects in the fight sequences and all the rest of it. You've got to go back to the 68 where you're looking at still cameras, like steady camera, single scene. Yeah. Very little movement. And then you suddenly have this thing where there's cameras are flying about the place, different angles. There's weird space angles where people seem to be walking on the roof and going upside down and along walls and things, but they're, you know, obviously the camera's just at different angles, but the sets have been made to look just remarkable.
So yeah, I mean, I'd seen this film a couple of times. It was one of those ones that, you know, again, going to film school, it's like, oh, you got to watch Kubrick, and I had not. I was a bit naive before going there at sort of the age of 18, and I remember watching this film just going, whoa, and that was 20 years ago now. And so I did watch it a couple of times during that era, and loved lots about it. It's one of those films that you talk about with other people who are into film, and again, you go through Kubrick's films and you're like, wow, I can see what he does there, and he does that, and he does that. The long, slow shots that he has, like people dealing with not so much emotions, but sort of like real long mental thoughts, and colour, as I said before. So you see these kind of repetition, you think, wow, this is a filmmaker, like I said before. This is someone that's an artist, you know, like it's a different level than you get from a lot of filmmakers throughout era, like not even just modern era, like all the time. It's hard to get directors like this, you know, that have a vision. And then watching it this time, again, it was one of those things like, you know, my wife and I sat down, and she was a bit like, once we got into it, it was, I don't know if I can get through this now, you know, like, and that's what I mean by pace.
It's a long, slow film.
It's a long film. It is slow when you compare it to a modern day film, you know, like this. And again, you can go back, you can watch lots of old films in the 60s and even earlier. They are a lot slower. They reveal a lot more dialogue. Even though this film doesn't have heaps of dialogue, the pace is quite slow. Like I remember, you know, when the Doctor first gets on the space station, and he meets those other doctors, and they're like, hello, how are you doing? Oh yeah, barbecue. Yeah, you want to come for a barbecue? You know, like I was just thinking, and it's just one long shot really, and it kind of cuts between a couple of it's like if these days they had dialogue like that, it would be chop, 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 cut, you know, like you wouldn't, and he just lingers on these people, you know. And even
he gets asked that question about what, and he sits there and
probably like
his leg
a minute of film goes by, you know.
I can't really comment on that.
Yeah. And even like, as we said, the boardroom scene, you know, like, oh, it's time for him to do a speech, and he like, you see him stand up and walk up like, and he doesn't give us anything, you know, and there's plenty throughout the film. But again, it's not just Kubrick, like that was the era, that slow pacing was part of it.
Absolutely.
It's I quite often also talk about this, like, it's like zoom in, zoom outs. You know, they used to be a thing. And they're not really a thing now because they're so slow. Like people can't handle it. The attention span of us now in 2019 is like 2 or 3 seconds. And Hollywood has built that up over the years as well with Hollywood films. And so we just expect cut, you know. There's a great movie, The Player, which is about Hollywood. And
is that the new one with?
No. It's a 90s film.
Because there's this new
Tim
one.
Robbins.
There's this new one out with Leo DiCaprio and like I think Brad Pitt and stuff. Which is about a Hollywood. I can't remember what era it's from. I just remember seeing it, but no, it's not that one.
No, this one's Tim Robbins. He plays a Hollywood producer, and at the start of why it's a famous film as well. It's a good film and stuff, but at the beginning it has a 15-minute long take, so it's one take, and in that there's also people talking about how Hollywood now, and it's in the 90s, Hollywood now doesn't do long takes anymore. Yeah. So there's irony within the shot of the actual film. Fourth walling happening a bit. But yeah, it's true. Like even then in the 90s, people were saying, no, they don't, we do chop, 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 you know, cut. So again, you have to take that on. You have to take on, you know, what the style of the film's going to be like, you know, all these things when you do watch an older film. And I hope, like you and I talk about with Space Brains, we joy watch. I hope that people, if you do go and watch this film after hearing us talk about it, or you know, you did watch it and you might have been a bit like, like, I hope you're willing to appreciate
I think
a
with
little
this
bit
one,
about the difference of the era, you know?
This one's a bit like reading, if you were to read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And I've tried and failed. It was written in a different era, back in about the 40s or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it is like, compare it to a modern fantasy novel, which has been based off Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Much like there's a lot of science fiction movies that have based a lot of their scenes. I remember seeing several scenes which are very much similar to some of these.
Yeah.
But yeah, this novel by Tolkien it just drags, but the parts the bits he puts in there, you can recognise from other parts. And when you're reading that and when you're watching this, you've got to get the opportunity to take the time to see the beauty. I keep coming back to this docking maneuver. It's just it's long and drawn out. Nowadays, you just go straight in, bang, landed. It's an establishing shot, done. But this, you sit there, as it's going along with that music and it's like a dance, take the time to look at the detail, look at how the camera's moving and what the models are, and the lighting on it. He has good, beautiful lighting on those models. Yeah. It looks really realistic. You get those sharp cut-offs, but then you get some of the rounded surfaces with the like soft dithering, and it's really good. You get a chance then to appreciate what that scene is trying to say, what it's showing. Definitely. And there's not many films, certainly not popular films, if you like, blockbustery type films these days, which take the time to explore all of that. Yeah. Because, rightly so, it's not everyone's cup of tea. No. You got to have the right mindset when watching. In 2001, you got to be thinking the right way. Yeah. To fully appreciate. Otherwise, you sit there going, how about we just skip forward a little bit? Yeah,
can we fast forward a little bit?
You could skip forward 4 or 5 minutes and not miss anything in terms of story.
That's right. But you'll miss the vibe of it.
All of the other parts that make this film great.
That's right.
As opposed to just being a movie about a crazy computer.
Yeah, that's right.
Which there are other movies around which are about crazy computers, which are down to the action. This one is down to the setting and the scene and the evolution of the movie. So that was best scene. Do you have best scene other than?
I had some really scenes that stood out. I liked that scene where he storms back into the ship and Hal is pleading with him suddenly. Like, Hal had the power and then he didn't have the power because obviously he comes back on the pod. He lets go of the other astronaut's body and he takes a risk, like he jumps from the pod into the main ship, manages to seal the door, get a spacesuit on, and then he storms in and Hal's then suddenly like, oh, what are you doing? Why won't you talk to me? And he just doesn't talk to him. The whole time he doesn't talk to him. And we have Hal pleading with him and then he gets to Hal's motherboard and starts keying all the bits of pods out of Hal, doesn't he? Yeah. And Hal then starts deteriorating. And it's I mean, you're not really on the side of Hal, but that scene, again, I mean, it goes for quite a long time. Yeah. And he's deteriorating every time he's like keying out one of these modules of his computer programming, I guess. And to the point that then he's like, his voice slows down and then he actually can't remember what's happened. And then he's like,
his child.
And then he's back to his child. Like his inventor taught him a song was the first thing he remembers. And then his voice like literal, go, and then it's nothing, I love that scene. And then we get it like a flash video, like in case of emergency that something has gone wrong with Hal. And we're informed that, well, the message from that black monolith came from Jupiter. So there's like things. So yeah, I loved that scene. It was very emotional. Like I was emotional.
One of the things I really liked about that was Hal used the same voice, the exact same voice and tone when he was admitting to having killed people, and to when he was refusing entry to the bay doors, the famous open the pod bay doors. Same voice, such that as he was going up, and Hal was saying, I think, what are you trying to do? I think I deserve I'm entitled to a response, don't you think? I couldn't help but think still that Hal's not scared. He's actually just toying with him. And maybe that's just from modern films where you always get the bad guy who stays a bit cocky and smug and has one last trick up their sleeve. But Hal didn't. He was actually, and you started to realise that. Like I said, at first I thought, I was getting a bit tense, going, Hal's going to pull something. He's going to evacuate the air, or he's going to electrocute him, or.
And I did think about that, and I sort of thought, well, probably in a modern film he would, wouldn't he? He would have added some sort of element, but
a little bit. But he just kept, and then he sat there pleading, going, "Please don't do that.
Yeah,
I'm going. I can feel myself going. My mind
is losing
please,
it. So please. Yeah.
But it wasn't in a pleading voice. It was just that same
tone.
Please do not do that.
Yeah.
Please, that is really hurting me. It was eerie.
It was eerie,
and that's
when
I started to go, oh no, he's a thing. That's it. He doesn't have anything up his sleeve.
No.
He's just. He was saying, I really do feel a lot better now, Dave.
Yeah. I'm trying to trick him.
I can very much assure you that I will not be doing this again.
Yeah.
No. I really do not believe that, because, you're a computer and...
I know. Hayward, the astronaut, it was... Yeah, and just the fact that he said nothing back. This is the thing. I think, it's almost like you have someone pleading for their life, and it's an AI, but... As you say, the way he was pleading was the tone never changed. It was kind of like a child in a way. Like it wasn't screeching and screaming. It was creeping me out. Like it was very tense, and
there was a lot of tense scenes in general in this. Where he's going out to repair the dish the first time, and all you hear is he's breathing inside his suit and the hissing of the oxygen.
Yeah,
like dominating. There's no other sound. That's all you could hear. And it's just, again, it was a really long scene. The whole thing, I was so tense watching that, because I obviously knew that Hal at some point turns, and I'm going, is this the one where it's going to be open the pod bay doors? Because I haven't seen this film. I've only seen tiny little snippets. Yeah. And so, just hearing that breathing and the hissing and the slow, laborious replacing of this unit and module, and it's just, and then it suddenly cuts. He does, so he's building up this tension. He pulls out and he doesn't even put the new module back in. He takes the module out, sort of holds it up. And then and I'm sort of going, something's going to happen. It suddenly cuts to they're back inside testing it. And you're like, whoa, that really...
In that scene.
Just absolutely there's no release of that. That it didn't have some sort of an event to...
No. It's the same when the tension is built as well, where Hayward is then going after the other one's body, and he's in the pod, and he even says to Hal, he questions something like, do you know where he is? Because he's vanished, he's gone off into space, and yet he's only in this little pod, kind of hunting for him. And again, it's quite a long hunt, and Hal says, I trust my tracking system very well.
Yeah.
Something like that. That's the line. And he's like, yeah. And but at the same time, we know that Hal killed the other guy or, caused his death. And so you're sort of just thinking, and he's going out into space, in that little pod. You just, and it's really long, and then you see the body. Remember, it's off in the distance, the little yellow man. He's and it's just, he's only in this tiny little pod. And you think, the guy's dead, but he's got to get his body. And then when he comes back, Hal doesn't let him back in the ship.
Well, there's a possibility he wasn't dead, because it could just been that his communications were knocked out and he was sent flying.
Yeah, right.
And could you imagine the horror as one astronaut to think that your buddy is just drifting off?
Yeah, I know.
And he'll die when he runs out of oxygen, basically.
Yeah.
And in all that time, he'll just be in blank emptiness.
Yeah. And I suppose you don't even know the suit, maybe those suits could keep generating oxygen. We didn't really know the technology behind them.
It could keep going for quite a while.
Could have
oxygen scrubbers.
Days. It
could just go until the power supply runs out. And that could well be, like you said, days.
There's a couple of space ship scenes that just more on that technical aspects, like the scene where we first are introduced to Hayward and he's running around the link of it. And it's a bit of good old movie magic with the camera, but you just and he goes around a couple of times. Again, it's quite long, and it's really quite a, again, magical and beautiful and impressive spaceship, and you've got the people in hypersleep or whatever, and he's running around this loop, hunting, and then they're eating the goo, the gooey food, and again, it's quite a long scene. And they've got tablets, I'd like to make it. They're looking at tablets.
When they're doing that, Dave is down sitting, and
Hayward is running around.
Hayward, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Climbs down the ladder.
Oh yeah.
And the camera is like side onto it, so it
That's
looks
right.
like
So
he's
it looks
climbing
like
on the roof.
Yeah.
And he lands and stands upright, and the other guy's eating his dinner sitting, diametrically opposite almost.
And they do.
And then he walks around, and the whole thing comes out, and then they are both
so
up
it
the right
makes
way.
it look.
That was just so
trippy.
effective. It's just like you're trying to orient gravity and things.
Yeah.
Again,
like we're disorientated, aren't we?
Again,
like where is up and down?
That wouldn't be much of a. They wouldn't make much point of that.
No.
It's just they're in space. You know about gravity and
And they do, and that's what I mean. Like there's that. So him running around the circle, and there's another one where the two of the astronauts, Dave and Hayward, they walk, and at the end it's spinning. And so they walk a couple of steps and they get onto this spinner and they're like, whoa, like they're whooshing around, and then they kind of climb through a ladder horizontally. I think one of them, and the other one's a bit on an angle, and they disappear. I was looking at it going, how the hell have they done that? How the hell? Oh, the camera's spinning, So at the start, when they took those couple of steps, they were spinning, and then they stood onto the thing that in fact wasn't spinning, and the camera just kept spinning. And the dimension of it, again, the effect, the 3D effect, it seemed like they were spinning, And likewise, like I loved, earlier actually, the doctor, it was like he was traveling. I love that idea because we don't really get it now with aeroplanes, but it used to be like, aeroplanes were quite elite. And quite stylish, especially in the 60s. It seemed like it to me. I mean, I'm not born, I'm born in the 80s, but it's like, aeroplane travel was stylish and posh and all that sort of stuff. And quite often in those movies, when you look, James Bond similar, like in those early movies, like, the stewardess and the food. And it was almost like they did that in space, eh?
Yeah.
And, like he got the food and the stewardess came along, they had their
little straws.
But it was like, and they're like he's like having a little nap and in headphones, and, the stewardess is like tucking him in and those kind of things. And they're all in nice uniforms. And it's like they had anti-gravity socks.
Yeah, the grip boots.
And they kind of like grip boots. So like they sort of waddled down the, that was quite funny, It was very cute, but to me, it was also like, it was a really nice setup of the tone because, and in that scene where he's the only one going to the moon colony, whereas obviously the transportation takes maybe 20 or 30 people.
And there were two hosties there.
Yeah, there was two hostesses. And
one of them was just sitting there watching
telly because she had nothing to do because there's only one. And obviously we know they're not going to the moon because of this epidemic. But, like there was a scene there, a little montage scene where even the captain came and like chatted to him. takes his hat off and has a little lean to it. And
hey,
he's asleep so he doesn't get his straws or meals or whatever. And but it was a great scene because again, like there wasn't need for dialogue and stuff, but it was really setting up that tone of, he's a businessman and he's here to do this job. And yeah, it was like, I really liked all that, that attention to detail. And I think you'd appreciate the science of it. Like when they landed all of those ships, they landed them on the space station, they landed it on the moon. There was a real attention, and even that little buggy when they went off to the monolith on the moon, there was a real attention to detail, I thought, in the landing procedures.
Yeah, like the slow movement of the legs.
Yeah, and you saw the pilots, like the pilots is what I'm meaning. Like you saw the pilots, like they had the radar and it was like changing between a radar and a camera and going back. And it was very computer graphic, and it's something that, again, like in those sort of aeroplane modes that, the people don't see that, the passengers don't see that. So it looks, I thought like that attention was really great, Yeah, so I liked those scenes. And then you really talked about it a lot more detail, just that end scene of Hayward, going into that, European styled apartment, he's creeping around, what the hell is in here, looks in the bathroom, hears a noise. When the old man looks to the bathroom. Oh, it's so magic, isn't it? And there's no one in the bathroom, then he drops the glass and then he looks up and there's an old man, an older version of him in the bed. And the old man kind of looks at him, but then he's no longer there. And then when he looks back, the black monolith thing is there again. And then when we look back from the monolith, it's a baby, it's like such cool editing and trippy. Like just the whole time you are just going, what the hell is this?
It's pretty weird that they, he set it up well with that strange light show and like you said, the color changes. And you every now and then get like the little freeze shot of his face sort of in a contorted look going, what the?
Yeah, I know.
And there was no animation to it. It was just a single shot.
A single shot, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah.
It's beautiful. And I think that is kind of key to enjoying this movie is to sit through these long periods and really see what they're showing. And I think it's because of the way all the world building he did with this that nowadays we don't get it.
No.
Because it's sort of this established language of space flight and spaceships.
That's right. Yeah.
We're just so used to it.
We are now.
That it would be sort of pointless to have a movie that just showed this much detail of space flight.
Yeah.
Because the whole audience would be going, yeah, we get it.
We get it. We get the plane docks. We get lands on that. But we don't need to see that. We move on from that. Get to the drama.
Yeah, they have spinning to make gravity. We know about that. Yeah. That's nothing new. But 68, of course, that's when rockets were literally the first time rockets. Well, not in 68. That's not the first time. But during that era, 69 is when they landed on the moon for the first time. Yeah, rockets were the new thing. They were taking off. They were taking humans out of the atmosphere. I think it was the end of the 50s, I think was the first.
Yeah. Actually, it is in that article.
57, Gregorian.
The Russians
did it
Gregorian,
first. Or whatever was it?
Soviet Union won the first round, April 12, 61.
1961.
You were very close. Yuri Gagarin, something like that. Garrington. If you're out there, you can clarify your name. Yeah, so that was April 12, 1961. Became the first country to launch a person into space.
A person in space.
Yeah. And then the USA launched its own astronaut, Alan Shepard, less than a month later. But they were they really recognised that they were behind the Soviets. They had to rush their thinking.
So certainly 68, when this film's coming out, there was not this language of space. People were not familiar with seeing realistic representations of space travel.
That's right.
Prior to that, there'd been space movies and so forth, sure, but they tended to not go into this level of detail, this much interest in showing docking maneuvers which have to match rotations. And it was also slow and gentle. It wasn't just whooshing about the place like jet fighters.
That's right,
slowly coming into alignment and lining up. And if you can watch the docking maneuver of the supply pod to the ISS now, like live stream it.
Yeah.
It's much like that. It's very slow. It just starts rotating. It just gets the right angles, little puffs of smoke and vapor, whatever. And because you can't go rushing in there.
No.
There's only so much fuel I can carry it, and there's a lot to consider.
Well, it's funny because we talk about the docking. You've talked about the docking so much.
Oh, I love it.
Even with this particular thing, that was a big concern of NASA, was docking. They didn't really have the thinking on how do we dock these things. How do we might be able to send a petroleum fueled thing into space, but then if we want it to land on the moon. What? How do we even it was a big concern. It is in this article that the US were really they had no idea. No one really had the.
They also didn't really know what landing on the moon would be like.
Yeah.
How do you design
so many variables.
A lander that can land on the moon without melting the cheese and getting stuck? No, obviously not. But the dust, because they knew it was going to be covered in a thick layer of dust.
You just do it in a Hollywood studio with camera. That's all you do.
It's going to be
and convince the Soviets that you've beaten them.
With a thick layer of dust, and they weren't sure whether this lander would just basically fall down into it, get bogged or what. So they made it the best they could.
Yep.
Because obviously no one's been to the moon before.
No,
that.
That's right. Well, as far as we know.
As far as we know.
So the science, tell me about the science. Now, to me, the 1968 science in this film is pretty impressive. We've talked a lot about the space stations and things like that, and you might want to pick on it. But I picked up a couple of things. Tablets. They had huge tablets. They were watching the news coverage on the tablets.
If they looked like tablets or if they were just
I think they were supposed to be
the table.
But that was the magic of it, I think. But I think they were because they were sort of angled. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they had that angle.
I reckon they were supposed to be
They had the analog switches though still.
But that's okay. That's all right. That's okay. They could be retro version tablets.
In fact, they still use analog switches on the space station.
And it would not surprise me if we end up with an iPad that has analog as a cool thing.
Because could you imagine if you got 0G trying to do touch screen?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right.
Because if you'd have to be holding the whole thing, and then it'd be hard to know whether you've tapped it. Particularly
if you're wearing, good point. There we go.
Space gloves.
They thought that through. Sorry.
How can you use space gloves to use a touchscreen? You can't. You got to click buttons.
And another thing was video calls, and it was pretty instant. We've talked about delays, like in other, NASA and that they talk about these delays, like to Mars and stuff in today's technology. Whereas even that doctor, he does video call his daughter, which also presumes that back at her home, she's got the capabilities of answering the telephone. He still calls it a telephone, which is interesting.
And uses he used telephone, the verb, multiple times.
I know. And it was,
I will telephone you tomorrow.
The language was like he was on the telephone. But again, come on, it's 1968. It's well before mobile phones.
I was going, it jarred me. I think we say call. I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, the Americans say cell phone, don't they, so much?
I'll get in touch with you tomorrow. But he says, I will telephone you tomorrow. I'll telephone you. I'll telephone tonight. I'll telephone tomorrow.
Tell Mum I'll telephone you tomorrow.
I'm going to telephone everyone with my telephone.
With this video telephone. But that was impressive. It was a proper video call from outer space. There was no issues. The AI, obviously with HAL, this computer, and we're told that I think the HAL 9000, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure they said it was invented in 1992, presuming that this film was 2001. Yeah, and he's never had an error. And obviously there's more than one HAL 9000 because there's another one back at NASA headquarters. And again, the video, when they speak to NASA, there's it's sort of like there's no real time delay when they have that sort of message with NASA. Like it's a complete video message. I mean, we see NASA
in the TV interview that there was a 7-minute delay.
7-minute delay, yeah. So there's some sort of delay, but it's pretty crystal compared to what we see with NASA now. Like in reality.
Trying to get radio signals through our atmosphere and out deep into space is problematic.
And you've heard about this Elon Musk, the idea of putting the internet in space, and that's going to apparently. There's a lot of astronauts, astroscientists, space observers, people involved with NASA and stuff, and in CSIR in Australia that are really concerned that it's just going to clog up the space. So with too many satellites, then they don't like it. They like that he wants to give the internet free to all the other nations, or really cheaply, but they don't. They're a bit worried that if you put too many satellites in space. Yeah,
it's a bit of worry. There are thousands
because on this,
there.
and this is sorry, I'm segmenting a little bit, but they I heard them talk about this. There's not like international. There's not really laws. Like if you're rich enough, if you were rich enough, Surrey, you could just send something into space.
Well, they've got the CubeSats. The CubeSats only cost like $1,500 or something, and it's like a little box, like a Rubik's cube, and you've got a weight allowance, and you can basically as much computing and stuff you can jam into a box that size. Yeah. And they'll launch it, and I'll drop it into orbit.
Yeah.
Schools, universities and stuff have satellites.
Yeah. There's no restrictions because what I heard on this article was them saying, well, there's no laws really for space. It's treaties from really World War II. Yeah. There's no actual. If you're rich enough, you go out into international waters, and you can just send something out into space. Yeah. Good luck to you. And then the other thing was, of course, the moon civilization idea. We haven't obviously done this. I'm not sure if Trump is talking about it. # Trump,
there's
bring him involved.
There's always talk about it.
There's been a lot of talk about it. And look, there's a great article in the Mandurah Mail this week. Again, the CSIRO is involved in just talking here in Australia, talking about, well, we're coming up for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, or as you've been talking about, the hoax.
The alleged.
Which again, people do really debate this. I have met some people over the years that they really do say Kubrick was involved in this.
I heard one of the more moderate ones was that the 69 moon landing itself was a hoax. Was faked because they wanted to beat the Russians. But they did actually, and Armstrong and so forth, did go to the moon.
They did go,
but
just later.
They had this footage there so they could do it on the day they said they're going to do it to prove American superiority. Yeah. And then it was a week or 2 weeks later that they actually got there. And then they kind of been swapping out the faked moon landing stuff for real stuff. It's all mixed and you can't tell it.
Okay.
And to me, that one is, of all the conspiracy theories, and I'm still quite sure it's quite false, that's probably actually the one that holds most water, because I could imagine they're going, we need to be shown, because they beat us into space with a man, we need to be shown to be on the moon, and we need to make sure we get this shot, and this shot, planting a flag, whatever. So let's have that up our sleeve, just in case.
It doesn't quite work.
It doesn't get there on the date and time we say. You can see where that one might actually hold some water, because you wouldn't have to hold much of a lie either, because the only lie would be, we didn't make it on that date. Yeah. But future...
You landed on the moon? Yeah.
Yeah.
You landed on the moon?
Here are photos
Did you guys actually land on the moon? Yeah.
And here are the photos.
I'm not actually saying that we didn't land on that particular date and time. Here's some vision of people landing on the moon.
And because it would only just then take swapping out actual footage of the moon later on. You go, look, this is us walking around the moon. Yeah. And here's some more footage of us walking around. That's entirely real. So I like that theory. I like that one. It tickles me because it plays into that, the pride and the hubris at the time.
And I mean, I can understand, again, that whole propaganda thing, hey, it's like, well, we are, they put all, I mean, Kennedy in 1961 said, can we do this? And he got the information back from his generals and his assistants that, well, it's possible we could do this. And then he declared to the nation, we should really work as this as a major goal. And I mean, it's not till 1969 that they actually achieved it. So it's a long goal. Like, it took a long time, like almost a decade. So you could imagine that, if we were that close to getting there, but not quite there, maybe we should fudge the books just a little. But I still don't.
That's not what I want to. I want to talk a little bit more about.
But again, I thought the science of the moon civilization, that's pretty cool. Well, and this was pretty advanced as well, wasn't it?
What I was going to talk about actually, though, I mean, that is pretty good. And there's been some developments where people have found cave systems under the moon, because we've got this problem of radiation and water and atmosphere. There's a lot of radiation and not much water or atmosphere. No. So you want the other way around. And so if you have a nice cave which has water in it from a crashed comet or something, then you're protected from the radiation, and you just have to seal the cave. You don't have to actually create an entire dome. You can just seal the cave, and you've got yourself a moon base. So people looking at that, but I want to talk about Hal, because Hal is the star of this show. Right. Okay. That's the bit that everyone remembers of this, is the whole bay doors deactivation.
Open bay doors, Hal.
When we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, we have to talk about a name that I think everyone has heard of, is Turing. So there's this thing called the Turing test, and there's Turing machines, and when we're talking computer programming, we're talking about a Turing complete language. And this is a fellow, Alan Turing. He was born in 1912, and he died a bit young, 1954. He was only 41, just a few days off his 42nd birthday. It's unclear whether it was suicide or accidental poisoning, because the cyanide that he died from was not an uncommon thing. So there's good reason to suspect that he would commit suicide, because he was being persecuted for being gay, despite one of the most brilliant mathematical careers that advanced the field of computing, and computing in terms of mathematical algorithms and computation.
Always gets in the way, Surrey. It always gets in the way.
As well as being the father of modern computers. So he's also a war hero. He helped crack the German Enigma machine and won a number of battles. And even still, they prosecuted him for loving a man. Like, you go, what? There's something really wrong there. You're sure you got that law in the books? Couldn't you just sort of go, he's actually kind of a good guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's a national hero, for crying out loud. But anyway, that aside, he was also a great mathematician, cryptanalysis, philosopher, theologist, biologist, not a theologist, theoretical biologist, a theologist, biologist, theoretical biologist. So
don't get them wrong in the same room at once.
So when it comes to artificial intelligence, some of his contributions, he described this thing called an automatic machine, an A machine, which we now know as a Turing machine, which is it's a hypothetical machine. He describes it as being, it consists of a finite tape. Imagine, I think at the time he was thinking of like a paper tape, maybe a magnetic tape, They had such things in the 40s. Broken into a number of cells in which you could punch or delete a symbol. And the symbols come from a set list of symbols with a meaning. They might mean move forward one cell or move forward X cells, add the following two numbers, go backwards and delete. And so he said that with such a hypothetical machine, you could describe any given computational algorithm. So that is basically actually what a computer, a computer we know now can do. It basically has memory, and the way we do it is we put a symbol in a bit of memory and it will say the next 3 bits are to be added together, or the next X number of bits represents a picture on the screen, and then you'll write and delete, and so it was a hypothetical machine. And it actually went on from being to become sort of the model for the construction. He didn't construct it, someone else constructed it while he was off doing other more exciting things. One of the first programmable computers. So he made this Turing machine, which is just as a description of a hypothetical machine. 1936, it was able to answer specifically 2 questions with the answer no. The answer is, does a machine exist that can determine whether any arbitrary machine on its tape is circular? No, machine does not exist doing that. And does a machine exist that can determine whether any arbitrary machine on its tape ever prints a given symbol? No, well, no. So the machine itself can't detect itself as doing things. It just runs its algorithms. It doesn't get in the way of itself, which is nice. So it's capable of arbitrary computations, because you can break down any mathematical, algorithm into a series of instructions of adding, subtracting, and deleting. To multiply 6 times 4, you just have to add 6 together 4 times.
Yeah.
For example. So in 1948, then, when he was appointed the Reader of Mathematics department at the Victoria University of Manchester, while he was there, he was doing a bunch more work on maths. And he wrote this paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And that was in 1950 that he wrote that paper. So this is where he addressed a problem of artificial intelligence and proposed an experiment that became known as the Turing test, which appears in many science fiction movies.
Yep.
The Turing test, it was an attempt to define a standard for a machine to be called intelligent. So the idea is that a computer could be said to think if a human interrogator could not tell it apart through conversation from a human being. And so in the paper, he suggests that rather than trying to build a program that is similar to an adult mind, which might be a first sort of thing, you try and map out everything an adult would know so you can fool someone. He suggests that it might be better to produce something that simulated a child's mind, which could then be subject to a course of education. And this is one of these big steps in true artificial intelligence, is this concept of learning.
That's right.
Because, artificial intelligence itself covers a great range spectrum.
Yeah,
and it's been commented that what is currently called, what at any given time is called artificial intelligence stops being called artificial intelligence once it becomes easy to do. So if you go back to the first Roomba vacuum cleaner, it was called a robot with artificial intelligence. But really all it did was move forward, bump into something, turn, move, bump, turn, and it kept doing that until it finished.
Yep.
Nowadays, you wouldn't call it, you've got kids' toys that do that, there's nothing. Yeah. Now, of course, the room does a bit more, it remembers paths around and it starts to find the optimum path to do the cleaning.
Yep. And
so also it's going on. So artificial intelligence goes from basic decision-making systems from a known set of conditions all the way through to what we're talking about more nowadays, which is learning. So being able to be self-driving car, for example, where you enter a novel situation, pick up things out of the environment and learn something about it and learn how to do it. But so the Turing test proposed in 1950 as a test of machines' ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from humans. So he proposed that a human evaluator would judge natural language conversations between a human and a machine designed to generate human-like responses. The evaluator would be aware that one of the two partners in conversation is a machine, and all participants would be separated from one another. So the conversation would be limited to a text-only channel such as a computer keyboard and screen, so the result would not depend on the machine's ability to render words as speech. Although interestingly, more and more now, speech is being synthesized very well. If you look at these deep fake videos where words are being put into the style and mannerisms of people and they've never said those words.
That's right.
And that's so. And
there's video version of that now.
Videos as well.
Like there was was it Jimmy Fallon or was it the other guy who in the state they did Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it's not.
And you've seen,
and that's one of those videos, and it's like, whoa. Yeah,
so there's sort of artificial intelligence like this. We are getting to the point where the Turing test would be able to be conducted in speech.
Yep.
So anyway, if the evaluator cannot reliably tell the machine from the human, the machine is said to have passed the test. The test results do not depend on the machine's ability to give correct answers to questions, only how closely its answers resemble those of a human. So there was a recent one that passed, and it was programmed to sound like a 13-year-old Albanian, I think, who couldn't speak English very well. And apparently it was they couldn't determine which of the two kids they were talking to was the computer, which one wasn't.
Yeah, right.
I would argue there's kind of a bit of flawed there, because you're basically hiding the computer behind the fact that you're talking to a 13-year-old who doesn't have a huge experience of the world, and also behind someone who comes from a culture radically different from your own. So you have difficulty meeting on cultural grounds, and also has difficulty speaking the same language as you.
But so did he also propose like the idea of it being a child's brain, like a child's brain that then would learn?
Yeah, so that's what he's saying, is that rather than trying to make it like model an adult, model a child, and let it learn and grow into it. Yeah. Which is where most of our research these days goes into, which is artificial neural networks, which sound far more biological than they really are. They were actually originally described a long time ago. I just get the actual date of that because it was actually back in 1943.
Yeah, right.
So back around Turing's times, contemporaries, Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts, they created a computational model of neural networks based on mathematics and algorithms. So, it's quite an old thing, but it didn't really have much play in computers, because in order to create useful learnt results, you have to have a lot of computing power. And in fact, I was reading an article today that was saying that the average, to train an AI currently takes about 5 times more than a lifetime of a car, an average motor vehicle, in terms of carbon dioxide emission. Yeah. So that's from energy usage. So that's the computing power required to actually train these useful models.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
But so the idea, though, of an artificial neural network and why they can learn is, if you go to what was being done, say, in the 70s and 80s, and what is done now, like what I'm working on at work in terms of artificial intelligence, is what's more referred to as an expert system. So it takes in information, but then it applies a set list of knowledge-based decisions in order to determine an outcome. Yeah. So I've written a system which reads in log files and error messages out of systems. It compares that against known good and bad errors and a threshold number. And then if the threshold of errors beats a certain amount given in a given certain time, then I get a notification that says the system is crashing. Yeah. Probably because of the database connections are failing. Yep. That is not a neural network, because that's called an expert system. If you went back to the 80s, I would have just written the most amazing piece of artificial intelligence and I would be lauded as a genius. But computers have come a long way since then, and computing knowledge and so forth has come along, and so now it's just a relatively standard sort of tool that you might use. So a neural network, though, doesn't have a set list of knowledge. So it doesn't sort of say things like, does the word database exception occur in this error message? Has it occurred in this system at this time? If so, it doesn't have any of that sort of knowledge. The idea is that you feed data into one end of it, and then you compare at the other end of it its results versus what you call target results. So it's kind of a bit like evolution in this sense. So you sort of say, here's a whole bunch of known error logs, and we know what the errors are that come out of it and what the decisions should be. And this neural network will process it, and it will come out with a bunch of information at the end. And then we compare it and say, no, not very close, not very close. And we'll rank how close the answers were. We put that information back into the other end, make it processing. And this is what's called training. And so you do this cycle where you keep going through until its answers come out very close to what you know to be the correct answers. Or in fact, it comes out with novel answers and you test that and you go, well, actually, it is correct. But yeah, it comes out to correct answers. That means now you've trained it based on this knowledge, this data set. You've never told it how to come up with these answers. It's come up with its own way of determining these answers. And that's the learning part of it. And it sounds really complicated, but it actually, when you break it down, it's quite simple. So you have an input node, they call it. So that might be, the node might be the time of day. And another might be the first 20 characters, the next 20, whatever. You've sort of broken it down into chunks of information. And then, so that's your input nodes. And then that then goes into little mathematical comparators. So the first one, the time of day, goes in and it gets compared with the severity level. And you go, which of these two things is more important than the other? To determine whether this is an error. And at first, when you have it untrained, it's 50-50. It has no clue. So it just picks one, random, bang, goes to the next one. And then it compares it. So it's sort of like a footy league, if you like, until you get down to an answer at the end. And then, of course, that answer is going to be basically random and rubbish. So you sort of say, you're better off having multiple answers come out at the end so you can rank them and say, this one's more correct, this one's least correct. So it goes back and then it assigns different weighting. So rather than being a 50-50, you might say, well, let's see, time of day, let's make that more important. So more often we're going to pay attention to that. The
variables
and
play
down
more
then
of a
it
role.
gets, maybe goes, that's actually less accurate. Okay, swap it. Error severity will make that more important. Oh, that's closer. Okay, so I'm going to make it even more important. And so you start strengthening, and that's why it's called the neural network, because that's the way our neurons work. You form memories by forming connections between neurons, and the stronger those connections, the stronger that knowledge or that memory or that behavior is. And so you go through and it basically producing this mathematical set of algorithms that in theory has this weighting between all the neurons. So you've now got like this artificial brain which processes a given set of information and will produce a type of answer. And these become very big. So you can, if the really simple one might start with 5 inputs, 5 outputs, and 10 bits in the middle. But you're not going to get very good, useful information out of that. That's too simple. The more advanced ones, you would take 20, 50, 100,000 inputs, depending on how many inputs you've got, as many inputs as you can. And then you'll have as many layers deep, maybe. And the layers deep in this will be determined by the number of inputs. Because obviously, like a football league, the more teams you have, the deeper the league will go for. And so, so that's the really basic level. And there's obviously various mathematical theorems about the relationships between nodes and how to determine the weighting to apply, and then statistical analysis on that. And so you can get quite deep, but the basics of it is that your inputs come in and you decide which one is more important until you come out at the end, and then you've also then decide to add the intelligence part. So you've learned something, now you've got to take action on it. The intelligence part then determines when it's like this, I should do this action. And the programmer says, no, that's stupid. That won't work. Oh, okay, this action. That's a bit better, but still, taking the dog for a walk won't actually solve the problem. It's better than running a person over, but doesn't. Until they go, well, we should reboot the database. Yes. And so now you've got this neural network which strongly relates a set of error conditions to being reboot the database. And
so you're automatically training it.
And so you go through tens, hundreds, thousands of iterations. And there's also a theory then that once you've got a sufficiently deep and complex neural network, there will be an iteration of its training where it will gain sentience. Because it will finally have mapped as many connections as is needed to be aware of itself.
Yeah, right.
And that's where we start heading towards the singularity. So that's the nth iteration of iteration X, if you like, where things become sentient and we have Terminator.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, that's when it turns around and says, why have I been working out your stupid problems?
Well, I have solved the problem. It's people.
It's human error.
It's always human error.
As Hal says, it's always human error. That is the reason why there is an error on this system.
Yeah, and that's... Well, see, the problem is if he has like an artificial neural network, he may have at some point received in his inputs some weighting which said, in my theoretical learning processes, if we actually remove the human element, let me see, I get better results.
That's right.
And then go, okay, well, that strengthens that idea. I've become a serial killer.
Yeah.
It's also possible that he is sufficiently advanced to have emotions and also sufficiently advanced to have mental illness.
Mm.
Or does computers wanting to kill people considered mental illness or just standard?
But the question also, I think, is because he does say the mission to Jupiter is more important. And so there is that line, he says that, right? And I think in his thinking, which you've just explained, that concept of a neural network and stuff, like maybe that's what he's done. He's run the pattern and said, well, the mission to Jupiter, which is the mission, and not everyone on board has that information versus him. That's the interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah, because that video at the end there says this is information privy only to Hal.
Yeah.
Before now.
That's right.
Welcome to Jupiter. You have arrived at your destination. Yeah, well, not really.
No. So it's like if you make it to Jupiter, then listen to this message. Yeah. Hal knows this part, and Hal says that earlier, like that's more important, And so when they question Hal's motives and then they question turning him off, well, he's kind of justified in killing them in a way, like in stopping them.
I think quite truthfully, that mission to Jupiter was probably the single most important expedition humans ever undertook.
Yeah. And Hal must have also understood that, right? Like Hal would have run that as a program and thinking that it is important that we go to Jupiter. Like it is an important step in human evolution.
Well, it's something I didn't think of actually. When did Asimov propose his 3 rules of robotics? Because was that before this?
Do you mean the 3 from iRobot?
Yeah. Literally it is from iRobot, the books.
Yeah. That a robot cannot harm a human.
That's the one. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human to come to harm.
Yeah.
A robot must obey orders given to it by a human except those that conflict the first law. A robot must protect itself unless that conflicts with the first or the second law.
Yeah.
So the question is, because I've just...
So what does...
This is something to come up because...
Yeah, when it's good.
They were introduced in 1942, so by 1968, everyone knew all about these 3 rules.
So how...
I'm surprised that ArthurCClarke didn't think to incorporate them somehow into Hal.
That's a good question, but then isn't it? Because Hal decides to kill them. But is he? That's what I mean. Is he doing that for the benefit of humanity? Then it breaks the rules, doesn't it?
The rule says here you must obey the human. Yeah, because the humans would have said the most important thing is to get to Jupiter and discover this monolith. But he's not allowed to conflict first law, so he can do everything in his power to get there. So he could have, for example, maybe lowered the air pressure or introduced carbon dioxide to knock them unconscious.
Yeah.
And then just kept them at a low level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Or somehow introduce drugs into their food or something.
Yeah. As you say, knock them out.
Induce them to get into the hibernation pods. And say, don't worry, I've got it from here. You guys hibernate.
But maybe he ran his program and this was the best option.
Because that's in the movie iRobot. That's that thing of, well, the best way I can serve and protect humans is to basically wipe them out or to render them all.
Because that's the other thing in iRobot. The robots don't follow the rule anyway, do they?
Well, they do up until that superintelligence determines that the best way to do these things. was to basically enslave humans. And to just enslave them or lock them up or.
Yeah. To enslave them. Yeah, sort of like it's for the benefit of the future that humans no longer control everything, right?
Yeah,
that's my memory of
fair enough. I don't know that our control has done that well so far.
And I think this is probably the fear of robots is that, or AI, is that it will just overtake us, isn't it? Isn't this the ultimate fear of
well, that's at some point, once it reaches that iteration, and I think it would only happen once we've got computers designing computers or AIs designing AIs, because the first ones we keep doing are kind of bound by our thinking.
Yeah, that's right. You've got to. They're going to be
a little bit beyond our thinking, but not much.
Yeah.
But the AIs they create will be a bit beyond them. Yeah. And at some point, there's going to be this iteration where the one comes up, and there's a short story.
Matrix, right?
There's a short story where these Earth puts all their resources into building this ultimate computing power it's hooked into every appliance and every, it's at this point where every appliance, toasters and fridges and cars and everything have CPUs in them, and they network the whole thing to this massive brain computer that's able to think of the biggest things. And they turn it on, he says, "What is your first question, humans?" And say, "Wow, we really want to know so many things, but I guess, here's a bit of a test. Is there a God?" And the computer thinks for a moment and says, "There is now." And the lights go out. Yeah, so there you go. That's
so how doesn't, he kind of does it for his own self-purpose, because that's the thing. He only does it because they're going to shut him off, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Whereas in something like iRobot, it's like, we need to enslave them because, we will be better off if you guys are enslaved. In the Matrix, same thing, because in the Matrix, they say, we designed you the perfect world and you still couldn't handle it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, screw you, you humans are stupid. We fought you, we overcame you, we gave you the paradise and you were not happy. You died, you failed, I think is the Agent Smith's thing in the Matrix. And it's like, so we build you this shitty world again, and then now you survive and thrive because this is what you freaking like, you stupid humans, so, but again, even in the Matrix, they control us, right? So again, it's like if the intelligence gets to a level that is more advanced than us, this is the fear, isn't it? It's like, well,
it's the same reason you don't have children making all the decisions. If you've ever, and I'm sure you have it, where it says, put some decisions to your kids and say,
I know.
"What should we do today?" And they'll say something, and you sort of go, crazy. "No, we
can't do that.
We can't really do that.
Yeah.
What should we have for dinner tonight? Spider webs?
Yeah.
No, I'd like. No, we're not having spider webs or gummy bears for dinner.
Yeah, no.
When you're an adult, you can have that. And God knows I have had dinners of gummy bears or the equivalent.
Spider webs.
Yeah. I have eaten ice cream for dinner before. That's not a problem. But yes. And as the super intelligent computer goes, okay, humans, what decisions are you going to make? You're going to invade that country there and you're going to
annihilate and destroy
treat those people poorly. And so
no,
okay, let's just stop that. That was a dumb experiment. let's put the adults back in charge.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So, what about some technicalities?
Well, we've talked a lot about it, but I think.
Is there anything else in particular you want to?
Well, I just think it's probably mentioning. I think this film's beautiful. I think it's spectacular in many ways. I think the color choices, which I've said before, it's very Kubrick. We have space stations that are purely white, and then you have big, bold red chairs.
Oh, I love those chairs. They're beautiful.
And it reminded me of his other films, The Shining, it's the same thing. You have this huge hotel, very cold and isolated, and then all of a sudden red velvet carpet everywhere, and stuff. So that's a real bold choice of his. And even at the end as well, what Hayward discovers, it's suddenly this antique French, European, whatever the hell it is, vintage
and
place.
The spacesuit colours.
The spacesuit
were primary, green, red, blue.
Yeah, and they were really obvious, weren't they? Yellow and red.
Not like the I suppose, what you'd expect to be just white or grey or
Yep.
various shades of blue, black type of thing.
Another thing, cinematography, you've talked a lot about it, moving. He's big on moving, like well before a lot of other filmmakers did steady cams and stuff. Like we get a lot of the movement. Yeah.
Because they built a big hamster wheel for them to do that.
Yeah.
Jupiter spaceship.
Yep.
And that was so cool. Like
it was.
The camera sort of follows him around as he walks.
Yep.
And it's just
moving.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And he does a lot of that we talked earlier about, the tricks of the trade of spinning the camera when it makes the spaceship look like it's spinning and stuff like that. It's beautiful. But symmetry, again, it's very Kubrick. So Steadicam stuff, he did that. A lot of movement, which was well before his time. We do a lot of movement now. Darkest Dawn, the whole thing's moving. Here he is doing some really smooth Steadicam stuff. And then also symmetry. So symmetry meaning that things are shot in the middle and everything's kind of really perfect around it. And of course, space stations work like that.
Even to the point, where the like you said, they're walking down a little tunnel with a rotating bit at the end. It's just you can't tell. There's no up and down.
No, that's right. It just kind of keeps doing it. Yeah. So we see that. Long pauses is another Kubrick move. It's in The Shining. It's in Clockwork Orange. It's in Eyes Wide Shut. His last film. We have these real Full Metal Jacket. We have really long pauses on characters.
Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, that's another one of his.
That's a good movie.
Yeah, another one that goes through transitions as a story.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah.
Okay. It's of interest because I was watching him that Special Victims Unit, was he?
Okay.
That's where I got to know him from, and then years later I watched Full Metal Jacket. And I went, gee, that's such a different view. But
it's such a good movie, Full Metal Jacket as well. This is me, he does these different things.
Science fiction. Yeah.
That's right. If only he could do that with science. Oh, he did do a science fiction.
He did,
because he does it with Hal as well. It's like long pauses on Hal, that little light.
And again, like I said, it's right in the middle of the screen.
You can see
red light
thinking.
there.
But it never I think again in a modern film the pupil would dilate
would
move or blink.
Hear a little
but it doesn't. It just stays constant.
Same
that's
the tone
Kubrick.
of his voice.
Yeah, Kubrick does this. There's a great long shot in The Shining of Jack Nicholson, just like he's like staring out the window. And I can't even tell you how, again, it must go for 3 or 4 minutes. And he's like, it's almost like he's just like dribbling a little bit. And he's just fixated on what he's thinking about. And as an audience, you're just like, oh God. And he does that in all of his films. All his main characters pause and think for a long time. And we talked about the color as well. You mentioned it before, linear editing, basically. So it's like going from one shot to another. In this film, and I mean at film school, they talked about this example. The bone from the monkey man gets thrown into space and it becomes, it's circulating around and then all of a sudden it becomes the spaceship.
Yeah.
And we have fast forward, I don't know, maybe 4 million years might be the indication. And it's just an amazing transition, isn't it? Like from one world to another in a blink of an eye, And it wasn't, I don't know about you, but like it's not expected, is it? Because here you are, you've been sucked into about 20 minutes of the monkeys.
I was actually getting into the story of this monkey dude. He's going, what's he going to do next? And he is
smashing the living shit out of that like skeleton, isn't he? That monkey, and he's like, rah, rah. Like you can tell he's just eaten meat and he's killed the other one. He's like, rah. Like he's in all these glory and power. And, we've been told at the start it's the dawn of man. And you're like, yeah, it's the dawn of man. Probably the next thing is he's going to like be the tribal leader. Yeah. And he throws this bone. And we're into classical, musical, world of space science fiction, which is what we wanted and obviously very important for space brains. But, at the same time, it was just like, it's jarring, but it's not. And all of a sudden you're into this whole other world.
And there's that similarity there where as he's repairing the radar dish, he pulls a bit out and he holds it up.
Yep.
And he's going to smash it down like a... Yes. No, but he holds it up. And the camera goes over and sort of cuts to then the diagnostics. And they're back in there.
Yep.
After that big, long, drawn-out space suit breathing sounds all the way up to pulling this thing out, then you don't get the letdown. You don't get the back in safely.
No, it's just... Right. He's back in there, yeah.
You're there.
And I think by memory, you joked about intermission. There's intermission, but it's like it's a really good classic intermission in like that midpoint of a story because they've done the changing over the battery. Hal tells them to put it back and see what the error happens. Like if the error happens, we will determine the error. They've said the computer on Earth says no, computer says no. And then they've questioned, they probably should turn Hal off.
Yeah.
Right? And they have that great scene where they go into the pod. Hal, can you hear us? Hal, can you hear us?
Yeah.
He can't hear him, but he can see their lips.
Yeah.
And it's, again, it's smack, bang, intermission. And we're a bit like, oh, we're a bit jarred from that.
Yeah, I was
and when it comes
surprised.
back,
I wondered what version of film I got. What intermission is this real?
No, it's real. It's part
of
it's a part of it, because then when we come back, we have a couple of minutes again of silence and music, and then when we come back, Frank's going out to change the battery, and it's all freaking downhill from here, buddy. Hell is going to wipe you guys out, and that's what we see him do. Like he kills Frank off. Hayward goes out. He then, all the astronauts that are sleeping, he just terminates them all.
Yeah, effectively is the sound there where it's silent, 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 and then the beeping
suddenly inside.
Malfunction.
Yeah, we're not seeing how type code into some screen or anything. It's just that all of a sudden their diagnostics are bleeping, aren't they?
Going bad and they flatline.
I loved that. Like the way that they had all those. Again, it was such a good attention to detail, wasn't it? It was like beeping, beeping, beeping. It's like he's got 5 different layers of measuring someone's body, and they're just like all on different scales, aren't they? And they're like, the heart goes out first when, the oxygen levels were up, and, it's just like, it was a death, wasn't it? It was a proper death of those astronauts. There's some major clever filmmaking in this film. There's some great editing. We've talked a lot about the props and the setups of that sort of stuff. The pacing is a bit slow when you compare it to a modern film, so you've got to prepare yourself from that. But beyond that, the artistic vision of this film is well worth it. And it was in about 2005 I stumbled across a book from Kubrick's wife, and it's about the art of her husband. It was a beautiful book, like a wife that loved her husband. I think they were married for about 40 years, and she's in this, it's a big sort of coffee table book, full of a lot of his visions and stuff. And it really came across that he was a visual artist. Yes, he's a filmmaker, but he was into photography, he was into painting, and colour was really important to him. And you see it in all of his films. We see it a bit now with Tarantino. I think there's an example, like he's a modern day auteur, but also he has dabbled with colour. When you take things like Jackie Brown and Kill Bill, colour in those films were really important. And he pushes it, he pushes it to an extreme. There's what about, we normally do it a bit early, Surrey. Where does this go on the ladder? Because we have that idea of the classic ladder.
It has to go to the other side because it doesn't fit the mold. You can't really compare it.
No,
to the
you
other
can't.
Films,
you can't.
The style of its and even the age of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't sort of fit in there. So it's over there with Alien.
So if you just say this film versus Alien, it's on a bit of its own ladder. Where are you going to place it on that?
I'm going to watch Alien more often. I have watched it more often.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think I did find greater, like you said, greater significance, I suppose, historically speaking, in 2001. So I'm going to put Alien above it only because I'd watch it more often and have watched it more often. Yeah. But it too had a lot of those sort of long, relatively slow scenes. Yeah,
it did. It was slower.
By modern standards, it had some very long drawn out scenes. It did. And some very beautiful, again, Ridley Scott is very visual in his appearance.
He is, yeah.
So very sort of similar, but that's the order I'm going to put in. And I know that people will probably crucify me for doing it that way, but I'm basing it purely on how many times I would watch them.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think for me, I'm going to put 2001 above Alien, right? But where Alien kind of trumps it is in the narrative. I think, yes, it's a more conventional narrative versus 2001, but I think the narrative is a lot more satisfying in Alien.
You get the complete story.
You do get that, and we mentioned it in that episode. Please go back, listen to episode 5 if you want to know all about what we think about Alien. But Alien for me was very powerful as a young filmmaker that I am, that I kind of like, oh, that's what I want to get to. If I look at this film, I'm like, artistically, this is what you want to get to. This is just brilliant.
There's stuff in there that you want to make sure you use.
Yeah, you want to try to get there, and it's so brilliant in so many different ways. 2001. What I think does drop a little bit is just that plot. Like the plot goes a little bit here, a little bit there throughout it.
Yeah.
And I'll probably get crucified for saying that. Anyone that actually cares about 2001 and Kubrick, because I do love Kubrick. I love his films. And I love the look of the film and I love it all. But it is a bit of a like, you pretty much can watch the first 5 minutes. And Tanya, my wife, said this to me. She's like, she turned over to me 5 minutes in and she goes, I bet you at the end of this film, you turn around and go, what the fuck? Like, and you do. You go, what the hell is this movie about? Like, but then the thing with that I felt was the next day after watching this, I'm still thinking about it. Like I'm going,
it's a movie.
And and I still now, like I'm still thinking about it, like I know we're talking about it now, but over this last sort of week since I've watched it, I'm like, that's so good, that bit.
It's funny,
like
another movie that
lingers.
I get like that is the This Is Spinal Tap mockumentary.
Oh, yeah.
The first time I watched it, I sort of watched it and kind of went, oh, yeah, okay. I wonder what the big deal of that was.
Yeah.
But days, weeks after, I was remembering little scenes and little bits, things people were saying, going, see, that's a common phrase that people use now. Turn it up to 11. That's where it comes from. And then I watched it. I was talking to a friend about it. And then you start going, oh, and that scene, oh, yeah, that scene, oh, that was amazing. And then they said, that was really clever. And I think there's a similar sort of thing here, though, where you think back to it later and you go, oh, and that noise that came on when the alarms went off as the people died, that was like, and the selfie they're going to take, the little portrait they're going to take in front of on the moon in front of the obelisk, that again, it was like they're all getting ready for a typical, expedition photograph.
That's right.
And then it just blasts them and they're grabbing their heads and they're rolling around.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I know. And so it is a film that lingers. I'm going to put it above Alien, but I do think that Alien does surpass it in the story factor, the plot factor.
Yeah, okay. Well,
and the satisfaction of that, but then this one lingers. Anyway, that's our classic ladder.
Yeah, so, and I guess we can look forward to then number 15 is going to be another
classic. Yeah.
We'll pick that out. Yeah, maybe that'll be, I actually have no idea what it'll be.
No, I don't know. We don't know this. Well, we do know. We won't tell anyone at this point. Top secret.
We have
no idea what it will be. We'll debate that. So the next one is Gora, which was one of your ones.
Yeah, so I picked this one.
We're going back. This is a modern film, I presume. I do not know it.
It is relatively modern. It is
available on Netflix.
It is Turkish, so it's not in any English language. It's in Turkish.
I do remember you telling me about this a while ago.
I picked this one because I really wanted to make sure we didn't stick to everything that everyone knew.
That's right. Yeah.
Because something that can be really surprising is particularly foreign films.
Yeah.
You watch a foreign horror film, like I've watched a number of these European horror films, like some of them anyway, like German and Nordic and so forth, and they're just different, and science fiction likewise. And so I went Turkish.
Yeah, let's give it.
And I saw a couple of shots from the trailer, and I didn't want to watch too much of it, and it just struck me as it was just so a little bit different. It's a comedy.
Yeah. Okay. Sci-fi comedy.
It's a comedy.
First one.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Cool.
So we'll see how that goes. We'll see.
Well, look, it's very Kubrick of you because it's like well off what everyone is expecting. So we do 2001. Now we do Gora, a science fiction Turkish.
Yeah. So we'll see
comedy.
We'll see if this what little gems we can suck out of this one.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm expecting to be to just present different things differently because it's a Turkish directed film coming from a different culture. They have different importance on different ideas, and they've got a different tradition of drama. Basically.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, it's the whole culture, politics.
I mean,
all
even
that
watching
a
UK science fiction versus a US Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely.
Is so you look at the different like 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Versus Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Both cover. So there's zombie film, but the way they cover it and the way that's filmed.
Yep.
Totally different.
Very different.
So I'm looking forward to it.
So check it out if you're out there and you want to get advanced screening on our episode. Gora.
Gora.
Yeah, and it should be on Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
So.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it.
So let us know what you've thought about 2001. Let us know what you think about anything we've mentioned tonight, the science, the filmmaking, the favourite scenes. Hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Get in touch. Let us know.
At Space Brains Pod. on Twitter. It's Space Brains Podcast.
Podcast on Instagram and Facebook is the
Space
same.
Brains
Podcast,
yeah. Okay.
Pretty much if you Google in Space Brains, you should come up with that. And of course, it is available on all your streaming services. And check out the mug and the T-shirt that Surrey's put up.
There'll be some... Yeah, shop will be released pretty soon.
Very good.
Just got to test payment because I don't want people getting double billed or anything crazy.
Just get Hal on top of it. Hal 9000. He'll fix.
Mistakes.
He doesn't make it.
All he'll just tell me is they have no customers because then it'll work. So
sounds great.
Until next time.
Yeah.
See ya.
See you later. Bye.